Hey, this is Michael Emery. Thanks for tuning into the Slow Baja. This podcast is powered by Tequila Fortaleza, handmade in small batches, and hands down, my favorite tequila. Hey, do you have a four-wheel drive? Did you always want to see Baja racing up close and personal? You need to join Slow Baja in the Nora Mexican 1000, April 23rd through 30th. The Safari class is your way to get your street-legal four-wheel drive vehicle up close and into the action. You got to check out the Safari class at nora.com. That's www.norra.com. Hey, I'm delighted to be here in sunny San Rafael, California today with Herb Bool on the Slow Baja podcast, and we are in Herb's backyard, and you'll hear some birds chirping and whatnot. We're sitting apart from each other wearing masks, so I apologize if it gets a little muffled, but I'm delighted to talk to Herb. He rode the Baja Divide in 2018, and you can see his write-up about it, a very extensive write-up and a lot of great photographs on the Baja Divide Facebook page, which is a closed group, but they let me in, so they'll probably let you in. And Herb, thanks for having me over. Let's jump right into it.
Yeah.
Tell us about your love of cycling.
Yeah, people always ask me, like, how long you been riding? And I kind of never really stopped riding as a kid. I don't know. I started riding probably, when most kids start, when they're 4 or 5 years old, and had a paper route, got on my bike, and found that a bike was just more than a recreational tool. I found out I could, earn some money having a paper route, and then I got into the BMX scene as a kid, and rode a little BMX. When I was, I think, an early teen, I got a Schwinn Continental, kind of more of a traditional road bike, and understood that there was a different level of speed you can get on a bike like that, and a different rhythm than a BMX bike could provide, and I just really gravitated to it. Something about the ability to interact with your surroundings and the people, and the pace being slower than a motorcycle, which enables you to really engage with the terrain and the environment. So so that led to some bicycle tours, and I've been around the bike for a long time. I worked for Backroads Bicycle Touring Company as a guide. I've worked as a messenger in San Francisco. I've done a lot of racing, bike packing. So I really engaged with a lot of different aspects of it, and it's just been part of the fabric of my life. And it's really the community, the ability to be outside, and the ability to have a shared experience has just been really something that's been very important to me.
Can we jump into the craziness? I think we talked about it earlier. You're a couple years older than I am. I think you said.
Sure, I'm 58.
58. I'm assuming you were in the bike messenger scene in the 80s in San Francisco?
Yes, yeah.
Can you just talk about that kind of nuttiness of that scene and that subculture and what it was all about? Because it was a scene. I moved back to the city in '88, and the bike messenger scene was hardcore. They drank. They had places. They took the plunge in the bay every year. I mean, it was an interesting spot.
So I did it full time during the summertime. I was a naturalist working out in the headlands for the Headlands Institute, and so we worked with the school year, and so I had summers off. So in the summertime, 2 summers, I worked as a messenger for 2.5 months or so, and it was you're right. It was quite a scene, and it was it's just this sort of collaboration between sort of punk rock and cycling and heavy metal music, and of course drugs and drinking culture, but because because there was bikes involved, there was a whole range of messengers. There were some messengers that wore spandex and they were fast as hell, and there were other messengers that, they didn't do a lot of deliveries. They were kind of maybe hanging out on the wall next to Sharper Image. There was a place where the tribe would gather, and I was probably more on the side where I was riding all the time. I mean, I wouldn't even take lunches. I had so much fun. Just being a part of that culture. I was living in Oakland at the time, and we'd take a van that had a trailer that could probably, I think, hold like 12 or 15 bikes, and I'd take it over there at like 6 a.m. in the morning and ride all day, and then come home 4 or 5, and but there were just a kind of a big warehouse party scene that would go on, pretty much 4 or 5 nights a week. A lot of rent parties where, they'd be coming up towards the end of the month, and they'd charge $4 or $5 to get in, and they would pay for their rent for quite a large warehouse, and there would be ramps set up in the warehouse where people, would be living and cooking on Coleman stoves, and there'd be 5 or 6 people like per room, but it was an interesting time to be in that community.
Well, before we lose the whole Baja audience, change gears here and say you grew up in the desert. We talked about that before I rolled the tape here, and you must have had an affinity for riding in some deserty and hot weather, although you're a Northern California guy now. How did you decide that you're going to ride the Baja Divide?
Yeah, well, I think I started following Leia Wilcox. Leia Wilcox and Nicholas Carman, I think, developed the Baja Divide over about 2 or 3 years, from probably 2016, 17, maybe 15, 16, and 17.
Can you give us maybe 1 minute on Lael and who she is? Because she's somebody impressive.
Leia Wilcox is the preeminent endurance racer, and I don't want to put her as like the female racer, because she competes with anybody and everybody, and she is just a real phenom on the bike. And she, when I first learned of her, I think I was reading about her self-supported race across America, and it starts in Oregon and it finishes up, of course, on the East Coast, and she ended up catching the leader, who was a gentleman from somewhere in Northern Europe, and I think they were probably about, I'd say, like 24, 36 hours from finishing the race, and he was sort of bargaining with her, like, hey, we've been chasing each other for this whole trip. What do you say the two of us finish together? And I think she just shifted down a couple gears and ended up just dropping him and just crushed it and set the record in this sort of self-supported race across America. And I'm just like, wow, I need to know more about this person. I found out she was working with her boyfriend at the time, Nicholas Carman, in developing this Baja Divide route. So I'd been always fascinated with bike touring and off-road touring. So I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So, January 2nd is I think that's the group start time when they've done that in the past. And I think the first group start was 2016. And
is this just like the Home Depot? There's some people hanging around looking for something to start.
Exactly.
I mean,
right?
You can be in the right place in San Diego and just jump into this tour on January 2nd. Excuse my ignorance, but that's an interesting visual to me.
Yeah, well, I don't think there were that many people in 16, but in 2017, I think there was something like 80 or 90 people that ended up ended up sort of starting this route together. It's a very long route. It's 1,700 miles of sort of dirt track through Baja. And 95% of it is on dirt. There's very little bit that traverses Mexican One, which is essentially the only sort of paved portion of the highway that goes from the northern end of Baja down to Cabo San Lucas. And the route officially starts in San Diego. It basically goes down through the center of the spine in the north, and then hits the Pacific coast, goes over the spine over to the Sea of Cortez, back over to the Pacific, back over to the Sea of Cortez, comes down to La Paz, and then makes a loop through Cabo Polmo, Cabo San Lucas, and then comes back up to La Paz. Goes through Todos Santos and then back up to La Paz. So 1,700 miles. I'm like, I got to do that. And so I kind of reworked my schedule and got about 5 weeks off, and made my way down to San Diego and spent New Year's Eve there, 2018, and started the ride the next day.
And obviously, in your regular life, you've got a relationship with riding. You're riding multiple times a week, if not every day, anyways. Correct?
Yes.
So
yeah.
you were ready.
I was ready. I was, I wouldn't say I trained for it, but
That's what I was getting to.
yeah, I mean, I ride a good deal. During the pandemic, I ended up riding, 12,500 miles this year. So that's a lot. That's a lot of miles for me. And normally I probably maybe ride like 10,000 miles or so. But this was a particularly good year. And 2018, I probably wasn't riding quite that much, but I was in good shape. I had contracted, unbeknownst to me, some bronchitis. Just right around New Year's Eve. So I began the trip and I wasn't really feeling well. And we had, went down to the harbor in San Diego where the ride starts. And there were 12 of us. There were 11 men and a woman. And we all took off and ended up spending the night at this little ranch just on the American side, about probably 45 minutes from Tecate, and all 12 of us spent the night together. We all sort of like talked to each other and were like, hey, let's ride down and at least make it outside of Tecate. And right now Tecate is sort of it's a little bit of a rough town, and the new notes for the last couple of years have asked riders to stay on the main road through Tecate and don't get off road, because it gets you through some neighborhoods. So they just want to get you through Tecate kind of quickly. And it was a little suspect when we did it too. So we all said, hey, let's all stay together. So we all crossed the border together, and then headed off and spent that afternoon crossing the border. And once we crossed the border, there were two Canadian kids, 23 and 24, and a gentleman from Colorado who had just come in, I think, second place in the Colorado Trail Race, which is like a 400-mile, really like intense single track bikepacking race. So I did my best to stay with them, and fortunately I was able to grab their wheels, but I was pretty sick and ended up being sick for the first like 4 or 5 days. But I really had to turn myself inside out to stay with these guys. And I remembered in my kit I had a Z-Pack, which is like like an antibiotic that's good for sort of if you get sort of
zithromycin or something.
Zithromycin. And I didn't know it was really good for respiratory stuff. I ended up reading about it, and it was. I popped it, and I immediately started feeling better. And so, getting back to like being in shape, it was really difficult to ride with that bronchitis for a few days. But once I got better, I was able to keep up with these guys. We ended up riding the entire route together, the four of us, and it was really an unexpected thing. I didn't know I was going to end up riding with people. I was kind of prepared to go on my own and do it independently. I wasn't planning on riding with people, and we just found out that we had very similar fitness and similar riding goals as far as distance, and that was probably one of the more special things about riding the Baja Divide was the shared experience, which was totally caught me off guard. I didn't think that was going to be part of it.
So interesting to me, again, I'm completely ignorant about this. Interesting to me that you would have said, "Hey, I'll do that alone." Because the hardest thing in finding somebody to do these adventures is getting that person who can take the time that you need to and get invested and say, "Yeah, I'm going to do it with you." Good, bad, or otherwise. And then you were prepared to do it yourself and found a group, and then the group whittled down to the four that, were sort of on the same pace. And I think there's a lot of similarities in the car world. When we drove the Baja XL in 2019, driving a 50-year-old Land Cruiser, you kind of find a little slower pace than some of the other people in more modern things. And we ended up hooking up with another group of guys in a similarly vintage vehicle going at the similar pace who also similarly liked tequila, and it it was good fun for the week.
Right.
So it's nice you found people at your own pace, or you had to push yourself to keep at their pace, I guess is the point here.
Well, I learned this lesson very early on, and I was when I was in high school, I was really really into skiing. It kind of I spent all my time in the winter, driving up to go ski. And so as soon as I got out of school, as soon as I graduated from high school, it's like, I want to go and spend this time skiing. So you have to go to the Southern Hemisphere. So it's either I was going to go to Argentina, to Bariloche and ski down there. I was going to go to New Zealand. I'm like, oh, New Zealand, I don't need to know the language. And so, I couldn't like, who's going to go to New Zealand with me right after they graduate from high school. So I ended up going there alone. And I realized that you're very approachable as a single traveler or somebody who's an individual. And individuals who are moving through the environment tend to attract other people that are curious about what you're doing, whether you're hiking or you're skiing or you're backpacking or you're cycling. And it's a wonderful way in which just kind of opens up a lot of doors for you. And it's worked out in a lot of my cycling because it's really difficult to find people who can take the time, who have the motivation, who have the equipment and the desire to do some cycling adventures. And so taking off on your own is it's a very powerful thing to be able to do, because it allows you to have control over your adventures rather than waiting for somebody who may or may not be able to come with you. So it's something I learned early on, and it's allowed me to do really what I want to do, and then hopefully drag other people along with me once I get out there.
So let's hop back on the trail. You're on your bike. You've kicked the bronchitis. You're covering how many miles a day typically?
Yeah, so it ended up being about 55 miles a day for the whole route. So we the entire route took us 35 days, and we had 3 rest days. So that's 31 days of bike travel, and those 31 days we averaged about 55 miles a day, and that's pretty much an all-day experience. So as I said, the four of us, we were really had a very similar mindset. So we were on our bikes pretty much right as the sun was coming up every day. Nobody set an alarm, but when you're camping in the desert, things are quiet. The air is still. You can hear movements. So somebody would rustle. It'd be dark, and You know, I think I was the only one that really had a stove. Everybody else was going real ultralight, and I had a little white box, white gas, not white gas. I mean, it can burn denatured alcohol, so it was just no moving parts. So I would fire that up, make a little coffee, and we'd be on the road, and we would ride pretty much until the sun was starting to sink. We'd kick back for lunch, for a couple hours, and we'd take a break in the morning early, and we'd take a break in the afternoon just for a little while in the shade. But it was a that's pretty much for carrying the gear that we were carrying, and not looking at it as a race situation. None of us were really trying to set any sort of speed goals or anything like that, because we were carrying a lot of gear. But yeah, it was an all day ride every day.
And you must have seen some very remote and beautiful locations and camped in them. And tell us a few of those highlights.
Yeah, the middle section of the Baja Divide, which is from Nuevo Odessa down through Catavina, which is sort of kind of on the Sea of Cortez side, and then it traverses all the way over the Pacific coast to a place called Seven Sisters, which is a pretty famous surfing spot, but it's also very remote. So from Catavina to Seven Sisters, and then down. I'm trying to think of the name of the town. It's the end of Seven Sisters, but it's about 120-mile stretch that I think there's really only one spot you can get water in that spot, and there's no food supply. So that route in particular has a lot of beautiful Sonoran desert, and just these cactus that look very similar to saguaros, and they are large armed, just beautiful succulents throughout the trail. And in the wintertime, the desert is really green through there and flowering. And you come over the sort of mountain range, the coastal mountain range, and then you see what is the Seven Sisters, which are these large windswept beaches that are really really remote, with these waves that are just curling and breaking for hundreds of yards, and it's pretty dramatic scenery.
Don't tell anybody.
Pretty dramatic scenery, and yeah, it's just gorgeous to be out there, and to camp out. We camped out probably out of the 35 days we were gone. 29 of those days I think we slept outside, and it's just it's another world down there in Baja when you get away from any of the urban suburban lights, and the night sky is just phenomenal. So pretty much anywhere along the route is dramatic in the evening with the stars.
And so practicalities, you were making a little coffee in the morning. What was your fuel? How did you keep your body going for that long of a ride and that hard of a ride?
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of diversity in the food that you're able to access, resupplying. So you can get bean packets, refried bean packets that are already cooked, and they're like little foil packets, and tortillas and cheese and tomatoes. You can also get oats, where you can make oatmeal for breakfast, and some cereals, biscuits, crackers, chips. It's fairly limited, which makes me think about Leia Wilcox, because I kind of have her in the back of my mind as I bike to her a lot, And I tell you that lady can live off, Slim Jims and Slurpees. It's just really,
Yeah.
people, particularly if you're into bike pack racing, or you know you eat on your bike, and you need to be able to eat out of a gas station, or convenience mart.
It's
So,
not glamorous.
um, and Mexican food is just different combinations of things that are made with corn and beans and rice. So we did our best to mix it up, but we always had stuff to eat, and I always had a few pro bars tucked away under my gear in case I needed some extra fuel. I brought I think I brought like, I don't know, 10 of those bars or so, and actually started off with a couple of freeze dried meals that I held on to longer than I thought I would, which was kind of a nice treat to sort of pull out some, macaroni and cheese, or some chili beef chili. It was kind of nice to have those as a treat. So, um,
I'm assuming you lost some weight on that ride.
I didn't lose too much. I think it was really hot in the middle and southern section. Up north, you're up kind of high, and it can get quite cold. But we drank a lot of Tecate after our long hot rides. Because you're constantly passing through little villages. I would say probably at least every day and a half. So you don't have to carry all that much food with you, and we always had pretty good access to it.
We can't wait to drive our old Land Cruiser down to Baja, and when we go with Baja Bound Insurance. Their website's fast and easy to use. Baja Bound Insurance, serving Mexico travelers since 1994. Hey, we're back on the Slow Baja podcast. I'm in sunny San Rafael, California on a sunny winter's day with Herb Bool, and we're talking about riding the Baja Divide. And Herb's talking through the practicalities of resupplying and keeping enough food in to ride 50 plus miles of off-road track a day. So take it up, Herb. Your 7 sisters, and you're talking about the diversity of the beans, the rice, and the lack of diversity, I guess I would say. Did you have opportunities to stop for tacos and such like that? Was there a better midday meal than your start or your finish?
Well, whenever we come into town, we'd always find a taqueria, and the Mexican food is basically really comfort food. I mean, it's hot, it's savory. They cook it up on a griddle. They season their beef well, so we would always grab some tacos. I was looking at something the other day. Thinking about doing this interview, I looked at a one of my Instagram posts, and it's like, started off with 3 carne asado tacos, had 2 octopus tacos, and then finished it up with 4 fish tacos just to round it out. So when you're talking about losing weight, I mean, maybe it's certain like I lost weight for 10 hours, but then I gained all that weight right back. So, and then something else you mentioned about just what we were eating. We would often get a bunch of food to go. So one of the things I carried was a Tupperware container, which I thought was a really good item to have, because a lot of this food's greasy, so you can stuff that with several burritos or tacos, seal that Tupperware up, put it inside your frame bag, and then you have a couple meals right there. So that was really I think a key thing that I didn't really forecast I would be doing that, but once you realize, like, oh, this food actually keeps pretty well, and if you're eating it within 15-20 hours, it's not necessarily going to go bad, particularly if it's doesn't have meat in it and stuff. So the food was good.
I had a chance to talk with Professor Paul Ganster, who rode 600 miles on the El Camino Real in 1967 by mule.
Oh my gosh.
And he was talking about the vaqueros that guided them would just have slabs of fresh meat, obviously with no refrigeration. And he said the meat just got tenderer and tenderer and
Oh
tenderer.
yeah.
And he said, by about a week into it was almost like a supermarket cut of meat, not the hard tough piece it started out as.
Well, we would
So
pull
it
into
was
some of these
15, 20 hours is probably no problem for
Yeah,
for a cooked
I would think
burrito
so.
or quesadilla.
And they dry their meat. Like the machaca meat is cuts of sirloin, and they would just make these cuts of sirloin, and then they would hang it on clotheslines, and that's how they dry the meat. So it cures pretty nicely. It's so the air's so dry, and it's not humid there, that it doesn't really spoil so much.
So you had warm beer,
War-
started off cold,
Yeah.
and then you had no capacity to keep it cold, right? You don't have little
Well,
coolers.
we would all of us like to have a little nightcap. So I think we all had a flask of some sort or another. Sometimes you just have a little bottle of something, and you could buy these little drink packets. And if you get a lime drink packet and fresh limes, you could get them all over the place. So we always had fresh limes. We would always sit around the fire at night. We'd have a little margarita, so to speak, and
I'm smiling underneath my mask here. I don't know if you can see to my eyes. I love it. A little camp margarita
yeah.
made
Well,
on
as
the
I said,
trail.
I was the only one really that had a stove, and I had a lot of equipment. I probably would have maybe curtailed bringing a couple things, but not much of the stuff. But the other three guys I was with, they were traveling super light, so they cooked over an open fire mostly. You could, so many different ways that you could do it, but in general, we'd have a nice fire and get some hot rocks, and then you just cook right on the hot rock. And it's a great way to you put a tortilla down there and melt a little cheese on it, and then you can put lots of different ingredients that we have available. So that was often the dinner that we had, and it's always such a wonderful way to end the day, is sitting around a fire. I mean, it's the best thing to stare into, and just think about what you saw during the day, the experiences you had, and as I said, two of the gentlemen from Canada, another gentleman from Colorado, we had really great stories about childhood and cycling, and it was a good way to end the day.
And when it gets dark there, it gets dark.
Oh yeah.
So you're probably not staying up a long time after that happens, right?
No, when you're traveling in the wild like that, you tend to wake up right before sunrise and tend to go to bed shortly after sunrise. I mean, never had any trouble falling asleep. I had a full size air mattress that never popped. It stayed inflated every time I blew it up, and it was very comfortable. I even brought a little air mattress pillow. I really wanted to have my sleeping system dialed in. I even brought a freestanding solo tent that really gave me a certain level of comfort. There were a lot of crawly things out there, snakes and spiders, and there are coyotes all the time. We were never really too nervous about coyotes, but they would come into our camp every night, and they would yelp, and they would they'd catch a rabbit or something, and they would just scream for 3 or 4 minutes, let all the other coyotes know that there was a catch, and it was just nice being sort of in my tent sometimes and just not have to think about sort of like
Yeah, in your tent and out like a light. So were the other riders going just under the stars?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The two Canadian guys had a tent, but I didn't use. I used my tent probably 50% of the time, and they probably used their tent maybe 25% of the time. We had only a couple days where we had much moisture, and with the type of substrate, the dirt in Baja, it's when you get water on it, the top layer soaks it soaks it in immediately, just like a sponge. And if it's soft, it'll peel up like a carpet on your tire, and you'll ride like 15 or 20 feet, and you'll literally have like a inch layer of this like carpet mud on your tires, and it immediately chokes up your struts or your stanchions on your forks, and makes it pretty much you can't even push your bike. And luckily we only had a couple times we had to deal with that, but so we didn't really set our tents up very much. Generally slept out under the stars, but occasionally it was really nice to have a tent and just kind of feel that little shelter and little safe space.
Right. For the bike nerds out there, Herb's done a magnificent, thorough write-up about all of his gear that he took and all of that, but we're going to go through it. It's all on the Baja Divide page on Facebook, and as I said, they let me in, so I'm sure if you're not a member of that site already, you can appeal and they'll let you in. But Herb, take us through your gear quickly. What did you bring, and what would you've not brought or left home, and what would you take if you're going to ever do this again?
Right. Well, I think probably one of my most valuable piece of gear, looking at my clothing, was probably just a puffy jacket, and I wore my puffy jacket every night. The deserts they cool off very quickly and they heat up very quickly. So we'd be warm as heck during the day, but the sun would drop, and it was really pretty cold, particularly in the northern section. So having a puffy jacket was awesome. I've ridden clipless shoes for 20 years or so, however long they've been out. I kind of immediately adopted them, and I know that probably most people in Baja or that are doing the Baja Divide are wearing flat shoes. There's definitely times when the sand is really really deep, or there's the only real paved sections of a lot of these desert trails are actually the steep uphills. So it's kind of funny. It's like, you're riding through all these trails, and then the trail goes over kind of a steep rise, and it will be paved. And I think that's just to allow vehicles, the ability to sort of navigate these steeper hills. So some of those are steep enough that you have to walk, even if you're super strong. They're just that steep. So I knew there would be some walking, but I was very, very comfortable and never regretted wearing sort of, clipless shoes. I was the only one. The other three guys all had flat pedals. And just a couple pair of cycling shorts, cycling vest, rain jacket. That was the clothing was pretty basic. So I would wear. I just had an external pair of shorts, jorts, if you will, that I wore over my my bib shorts, because that just kept them clean. Allowed me to sort of, if you're cooking and doing all sorts of stuff, your shorts are going to get really dirty. So it was nice to have that sort of external barrier against the two pair of cycling bibs that I had. And I just rotated them. I forgot to bring some chamois. I picked it up. At this single bike shop down there, the Foss Bike Shop, which ended up being a godsend for me. I'll tell you that story in a little bit. But so the bags I used a porcelain rocket design seat bag, which has a metal frame that really keeps it from moving around, and that's basically where I kept all my clothes. So all my clothes, my outerwear, everything that fit under my seat, and then I had a handlebar bag, and in that handlebar bag I was able to fit a Z-Pack sleeping bag. It has a 900 downfill, really warm down to 20 degrees, and it's just a little over a pound. I mean, it's a pound or something. It's super duper light. And then I have a really small single person freestanding tent. I had a ground cloth, and then I also had an air mattress and a pillow. So that all lived in my handlebar bag, and I had a couple of water bottle bags. Trying to think what you call those little water bottle bags that hang on your handlebars. And then I had a large frame bag. In my frame bag, I carried, I had definitely all my sort of like fix-it supplies, toolkits, an extra tube, some tubeless tire sealant, spare links, spare cleats, and just a bunch of miscellaneous equipment. And then I also was able to carry, all my food in there as well. So yeah, that's kind of what what my bike looked like on the outside. And I rode a Jones bike, and Jones is a gentleman that lives in Southern Oregon, and he's designed all steel rigid bikes. So this has it's a 29er plus, meaning that the tires that you can use on this can be up to 3 inches. So I had WTB 29 by 3-inch tires. So quite large, and it was a full rigid bike. So yeah.
So
Super fun.
practicalities, what did you have to fix? Did you have to replace a lot of tire tubes or any of that stuff?
So yeah, that's the interesting story. That there were 4 of us. 3 of us were riding WTB tires, and 2 of us had Maxxis tires. Nobody had a flat the entire time.
Wow.
So 1,700 miles times 4 of us, no flats. We all had tubeless tires, and I certainly had some leakage going out, and you're running over thorns and cactus some of the time. So, but rarely did I ever have to put air in my tires. I would lower the tire pressure when we get into some pretty deep sand, and the advantage of having sort of a 3-inch tire is I could lower the tire pressure down to like 9 psi. And in general, if I'm riding on like hard terrain, maybe I'm running like 18 psi, but they're big tires, so it offered you some level of suspension. So when we were we were in a quite remote section in the middle, about halfway down the peninsula, and just riding, and we weren't usually riding real close to each other, and I was I think I was riding in the middle somewhere, but anyways, my seat post broke.
Wow.
And
What do you do with that?
It broke in such a position that that if I took my seat bag off and I put the post back in the frame and put it down far enough so that it would have some stability, that it was very difficult to pedal sitting down. I mean, it was pretty stubby. And we were probably not even halfway done with the trip, and we were probably kind of right smack in the middle. So I was just like, okay, well, let's we were actually not far outside Saint Thomas, and so I think it was probably about another 4-hour ride. So it wasn't that difficult. Kind of stood, and I actually had a backpack it was a real small backpack, and I was able to fit everything in my seat bag in the backpack itself. Got the bike all set up, and
So you weren't wearing a backpack every day. You just
no, I didn't.
you
I
had
didn't
a
really
spare.
want to wear a backpack. I didn't wear a backpack at all. But I just had it just in case. We needed to do something. I actually had the capacity to carry a lot of extra water and different things, but I didn't really want to ride with a pack. So we get to this town, and Brian, the gentleman from Colorado, he was kind of our leader in a way. He really taught me. He had a lot of experience, and so I'm like, hey, I'm gonna catch the bus here in San Tomas, and I'm gonna meet you in 3 days. I'm gonna meet you in Mulegé, okay? Because I'll just take the bus, take you guys 3 days to meet there. I'll contact the Foss Bike Shop, and they will send a seat post by courier through the bus system to Mulegé, and then I'll just pick up that, and it's not going to be a big deal. And Brian was like, "We'll have nothing to do with that, man. We're going to get your seat post fixed." I'm like, "What? How are we going to do that?" He's like, "Let's figure it out. Let's just start asking people." So So we go to a couple of like car mechanic fix places, and they're like, no, no, you want to go down this area where there's more, there's more sort of fix-it shops, and these guys are like, you need to go to the carny people, the guys who run carnivals. So we're like,
Of
ride
course.
down the road. It's kind of late, We've been riding all day. I'm like, hey, I was like kind of psyched. I'm like, I'm just gonna take the bus, okay? You guys, I'll meet you in a couple days. So I was like, I wasn't in a hurry to get it fixed. And Brian's like, we're gonna get this thing fixed. So we pull in. There's all these rides all stacked up. We're like, hello, and the guy comes out and we're kind of speaking very broken Spanish. And I take the seat post off, and it's a Thompson seat post, and it's it's some hybrid. I don't know if it was titanium or some hybrid aluminum, but it's ovalized in the middle, so it's not necessarily round and easy. It's not something you just sort of slip in some some smaller steel bar and put it together. So the guy's like, we can fix it. So he's wandering around his shop, and he's like looking all over at these little posts and these bars, and we are sitting underneath a little awning that's held up by, again, like a metal bar. And he comes and grabs the metal bar. Like, he's so excited he didn't even realize it almost like smacks us in the head. So he gets this bar and gets his he cuts it and then gets his welder out, and he's heating it, and he's hitting this thing on an anvil, and he's looking at the seat post, hitting it on an anvil, and he's basically making this perfect insert. So he inserts one into
Oval.
Yeah,
a perfect oval insert.
Perfect oval insert.
Amazing.
And because he's been hitting on it, and it was not a solid bar. It was hollow, but all the work he'd done to it, it basically became like a solid metal bar. Inserted it into the bottom piece, and then put the top on, and literally had to work it pretty hard to get the two pieces to join, and they joined, and we had two of us in one end, two of us in the other, and tried to pull it apart. Couldn't pull it apart. Slipped it in my bike frame, and I rode to Mulahey with these guys.
You're back in
and
business.
We made it in 3 days, and it was actually one of the more difficult transitions from really the West Coast to the East Coast over towards the Sea of Cortez, which we ended up on, and it was amazing. I didn't ride with my with my seat bag connected to the seat post. I rode with a backpack for those 3 days, but I sat on it pretty hard and was super happy with it. So we get to Mulahey, and sure enough, I had a titanium seat post there that was delivered the next day. Put that in my bike frame, and I gave my seat post to some other BMX kids that were in the neighborhood.
So there is a great bike shop in Baja that
Yes.
helps people on this.
Yeah. It's the Foss Bike Shop, and it's
In Mulahey.
no, it's just it's outside of Mulahey. It's FASS. I would
That's all right. We'll look it
yeah,
up.
Yeah.
Hey, well, take us home. So what were your lasting impressions? What were your highlights? Now we're 3 years down the road from that trip. Just 3 years down the road. So tell us, what you remember about it.
Well, I tell you, the highlight of the trip happened just from Mulahey. So from Mulahey, there's a couple options of the route, and the main option that most people choose to do is that you can get a panga, and a panga is an open wooden small fishing vessel that locals set out fishing nets with, and you can take a panga, go down to the harbor and negotiate some stuff, and you can take a panga across the Bahia de Los Angeles to a peninsula, and it's about a 2-hour journey in these pangas, and you really get out, feel like you're out in the open seas. So we set off There were more than just the four of us. There were some other bike packers that we connected with in Mulegé, and we took two pangas across. There were four of us in each panga, and we're right out in about the middle, and the engine in one of the pangas breaks, and so it's rudderless.
Yeah.
And it's super windy and super heavily loaded.
That's the only time. That's the only time they break.
There's about 4 inches between the top of the middle of the panga and the water, and literally like waves are kind of lapping in, and these guys can't steer into the waves because they have no way to control the boat. So we throw them some ropes. The ropes break. We finally ended up, lashing some ropes back and forth enough to pull them. But because we're pulling them, we're sinking lower in the water. And I literally thought that I was going to say goodbye to my bike. I'd actually taken... You couldn't really move around in the boat much because you don't want to rock it. But I'd gotten just a couple things. I think I got my passport or something. I put it on my person. We had no life jackets, of course. I don't know if there's any life jackets in the boat. Anyways, we made it over to the peninsula, and we had purchased some fresh fish from these fishermen because we were just coming from Mulegé. We had tons of supplies, so we had jalapenos and cheese and tortillas, and of course we had tequilas and beers, and there was another group that came after us. So I think we ended up being 10 people. We found a metal grate that was part of some fishing apparatus, and we put it on this bonfire, cleaned it up, got rid of all the rust, and we cooked fish over the open fire, and we just had the most amazing night. And this is like a really, really remote peninsula that nobody gets to. There's no roads to it. The only way you can get there, well, I mean, you could hike there or walk there. I mean, there's no vehicle tracks around there, and it was just a really special opportunity to be there. One of the gentlemen that came over was from Belgium, and he had a drone and took some beautiful footage of us in the morning as we're riding along this peninsula. And I've since met up with him. I met up with him in Belgium last year, and we talked about our experience there on the Bay de Los Angeles, and it was pretty much the most magical night there, and the rest is just I think the camaraderie, the sense of being in this unspoiled wilderness and having such an appreciation for the life in the desert, which is kind of unique organisms, both the botanical side and the flora side. The animals there are very hardy. So I don't know. It's hard to put a finger on anything overall, but that was certainly probably our best evening that I had on the trip.
And can you talk a little bit about the people of Baja and the people that you met and what some of those experiences were like?
The people of Baja remind me of the people who I've had an opportunity to be with, and some of the travels I've had, and the people of Baja are not material rich at all. They live most of them live a fairly subsistence life. The people I'm talking about are not the people in some of these towns, like maybe Mulegé or Cabo San Lucas or La Paz, but these are the people who live out on the ranches, and they live with the land. They live with the seasons. They are part of the fabric of nature there, and they will give you anything they have, because that's the way they live with their community, and that's the way they live with people who pass through, and they don't expect anything in return. They're very, very gracious, very humble people, and we were just offered so much along the journey, and really treated with open arms. So the people are super duper friendly. I was a little worried about some of the dogs. I actually had a little thing of sort of dog pepper spray that I had kind of on the quick draw near my handlebar bag. I never used it, but there were some dogs that kind of made us a little worried. But you don't have to be the fastest. You just don't have to be the slowest when the dogs are chasing you.
Well, I think we're going to leave it right there, Herb Bool. That's words to live by. Hey, thank you so much for talking to me about the Baja Divide and your trip there 3 years ago right now, this month. And if people wanted to find you on the internet, you were findable. I found you. It's Herb Bool on the Baja Divide. And do you communicate with people in any other way? Do you want me to throw that out?
I have an Instagram account. It's Herb Bool too,
and that's Herb Bool.
That's correct.
Like wool, but with a B.
Yeah.
All right, Herb. It's been a delight. Thanks for making some time for Slow Baja.
That's been a lot of fun, Michael.
Cheers. Slow Baja's wardrobe is provided by Taylor Stitch. I was lucky enough to test some items on my 3,000-mile Baja XL trip. The vertical jacket, the California shirt, which is a beautiful flannel shirt. I call it the Baja California shirt. And some white oak, beautiful selvage denim jeans. Put all that stuff on to make me look good in Baja, and I never took it off. I was wearing that stuff for 10 days straight. That vertical jacket is a handsome, handsome jacket. In the truck, under the truck, at dinner. Taylor Stitch, clothes that are meant to wear in, not out. Folks, you made it this far. I gotta ask you, please help us out. Rate it, review it if you're on iTunes. Share it with a friend. Go to slowbaja.com or slowbaja on Instagram or Facebook and get some stickers, hats, t-shirts. Every little bit helps me put a gallon of gas in the old FJ40 or a taco in my belly. So please do what you can to help out. I really appreciate it.